G'day boys and girls, I thought I'd give you a quick recap lesson on what we've been doing in mathematics so far this term regarding whole numbers, and here it is. So the first thing we started with was how to read and how to write a number. So quick side note, a number and a digit is not the same thing. This is a number, and that number is made up using different digits. So if you do get a question in an exam, or an assessment or a test where it requests you to give the value of a specific digit, it refers to that one single digit within a particular number. Right, back to reading and writing a number. So we read and write numbers in groups of 3. In other words, I'll focus on that group, and that stays 862. I'll focus on that group, which is 34, and that group, which is 561. But we need to know our place values to read the number properly. So the place values that you've been taught so far are the following. Let's just take a step back and talk about place value. What is place value? Place value refers to the place where a digit stands. So the place values that we've done so far. Over here I've got my units, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 million, and 100 millions. Now, you need to know your place values in order to know your values and how to read your number. So we're going to start over there. Let's read it all together. That will be 561,034,862. So that's reading and writing numbers. The third thing we spoke about was our value and our place value. So we've just done place value, and that flows into value, because if you don't know your place values, you're not going to be able to identify your value. So let's say you get a question that requests you to give the value of that 6. So like I said, you need to know your place values in order to know your values. What is the definition of value? Value is what a digit is worth. So because I know that that is my 10 millions, that 6 will be worth 60 million. The next thing we looked at was expanded notation. You can be asked to write that number in expanded notation, or you can be given an expanded notation or addition and be asked to write that as a whole number. So let's have a look at this one, and then we write it in expanded notation. And we start over there with a 5. So this is equal to 500 million plus 60 million plus 1 million. Right, the 0 serves as a placeholder, so at this stage there are no 100,000s. You don't need to write plus 0. You can, it wouldn't be incorrect, but you don't need to. The 3 would be 30,000, the 4, 4,000, 8 is 800, 6 is 60, and the 2. We also looked at smaller than, bigger than, and equals, comparing whole numbers. So let's say you need to compare two numbers. Let's take the one up top, 561,034,862, and I need to compare it to 651,034,862. And you need to fill in either smaller than, bigger than, or equals. First of all, you need to know what each symbol means. So this one is smaller than, this one is bigger than, and of course that is my equals sign. When I compare these two numbers, I would always start with the biggest place value first, my 100 millions. And immediately I see that on this side I have 500 millions, and over here I've got 600 millions, which means that this side is smaller. So this number is smaller than this number. The other thing we did was ascending and descending order. Ascending order is when I arrange numbers from small to big. I tried reminding you about a plane that is ascending, so it goes from low to high. Try to remember it that way, small to big numbers. And descending order, when a plane descends, it goes from high to low, so big to small. We also looked at rounding off numbers. So when I round numbers off to the nearest 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, or even a million, always remember that your answer will always end on 0. The number of zeros are the minimum that your answer will end on, depending on what you're rounding off to. So rounding off to the nearest 10, your answer will end on a minimum of 1 0. Rounding off to 100, your answer will end on a minimum of 2 zeros, and so on and so forth. When I round to the nearest 10, I always look at my unit. When I'm rounding to the nearest 100, I look at my tens. When I round to the nearest 1,000, I look at my hundreds, and so on and so forth. So I always look at the place value to the right-hand side of the digit that I'm rounding off to. I've got a little rhyme that I need you to remember, and it goes like this. If it is 5 or more, I add 1 more. But if it's 4 or less, it stays the same. So let's have a look at the number I've got over here. If I'm going to round that to the nearest 10, first thing I remind myself is that this answer will end on 1 0. If I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I look at my units. What does my rhyme say? If it's 5 or more, I add 1 more. So the 330, I'm going to jump over to the next 10. So that's why I say I add 1 more. So that's going to become the 4. And of course, the rest of the number is not affected. All of the rest stay the same. So it stays 283,597,440. If I'm rounding to the nearest 100, my answer will end on 2 zeros. If I'm rounding to the nearest 100, then I look at my tens. And what does my rhyme say? If that's 4 or less, then this will stay the same. So that stays a 4. And of course, as I said, the rest of the number does not change. It's unaffected. Let's have a look at rounding to the nearest 1,000. If I round to the nearest 1,000, now my answer will end on 3 zeros. So if I'm rounding to the nearest 1,000, I'm going to be looking at my hundreds. What does my rule say? If it's 4 or less, this stays the same. If I round to the nearest 10,000, my answer will be ending on 4 zeros. If I'm rounding to the nearest 10,000, then I'm looking at my thousands. This is the only time when the rest of the number is affected, because what is going to happen now, my rhyme says if that's 5 or more, I need to add 1 more. So what happens if I add 1 to 9? It becomes 10. But I can't just throw that 1 away, and this is when the rest of the number is affected. So I'm going to add 1 to my 5, which then becomes a 6. And that is how you round off. Exactly the same pattern will follow with 10,000, 100,000 and a million. And remember the rhyme. If it's 5 or more, I add 1 more. If it's 4 or less, it stays the same.